feel free to keep communicating with us in the chat. I'm just so happy that you all are here. The person who has a degree in exercise physiology, I feel like I want to talk to you sometime because I'm training on a bicycle right now. But anyway, that's a different story. We'll talk about that later offline. In order for us to consider the expectations that we place on ourselves, right? And so I talked earlier about how there are these expectations, both internal and external, that might be realistic or unrealistic. It's helpful for us to think about the ways in which being a woman has been framed for us. What is it when we say that there might be expectations for women? What does that look like? And so what better way than considering the ways in which we might be thinking about the expectations for womanhood than by posing this question: what are the stereotypes of a good girl and a bad girl? And how is that explained to us in our youth or even today? So in the chat, I want you to type in first what it means to be a good girl. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this activity as you all type what it means to be a good girl. This activity is actually inspired by the book, The Curse of the Good Girl by Rachel Simmons. So if you're looking for readings on this topic and others, I also highly recommend the book Brave, Not Perfect. Both of those are looking at the ways in which girls, early adolescents, are taught about expectations of being good, and that sometimes that can mean that we are afraid of failing, right? Because to be good might be being perfect. And as you all continue to write what it means to be a good girl, I want to share my own experience. When I was younger, being a good girl meant that I was to be obedient and respect authority. And that sometimes meant that I felt I may not feel as though I could share my insecurities or my emotions, and was afraid that that would come off as like being a challenge. And I'm thinking in particular to some of the experiences that I might have had in classrooms when I was in elementary school or middle school, and how, I felt like I had to just very much behave in a particular way and didn't always feel like I could raise my hand, etc. Being a good girl also meant dressing up in very particular outfits. And I can remember very clearly this one purple Sunday dress that my mother kept putting me in that was just itchy and uncomfortable, right? And I'm looking to the chat and I see good girls do everything to make their parents proud. Respect was hugely important. And I'm wondering what that means when we say we do everything to make our parents proud. What can that include? And I'm seeing someone saying meeting expectations of others and following directions. Maybe when we're trying to make people proud, it's often what other people are wanting for us. It's not necessarily what we're wanting. I'm seeing quiet, demure, keeping your legs crossed at the ankles, following the rules, social and public rules, don't cause trouble. And someone said good grades. I remember when I brought home a C once, that was a nightmare. My dad was terrifying in that moment to me as a sixth grader, never got a C again. I see someone saying that their thoughts have changed over time, and now to think of a good girl as someone who thinks for herself and knows self-love. She feels good in her own skin. I love that. I think that's a good place for us to stop in terms of thinking about what it means to be a good girl, because I think it shows the ways in which we can change our perceptions. We can redefine for ourselves what it might mean to be a woman, what it might mean to be a good girl. And it can be about self and self-love and feeling comfortable in our own skin. But there were so many themes that I saw emerging in the chat, right? This following rules, and sometimes the rules aren't made for us to be able to succeed, right? Sometimes the rules, if I think back to one set of grandparents, the rules were to be seen and not heard when we were little, right? So to be quiet, and I saw people saying quiet and demure. So I really appreciate you all sharing this. Now, you know what the next question is going to be. And if you're familiar with Full House at all, Mary Catherine very purposely chose the picture that we see on the PowerPoint. This is a scene in which Stephanie Tanner is being given a cigarette in the school bathroom, okay? So I want us to think about what it means to be a bad girl. And in some ways, we may see the bad girl notions play out by how we were defining what it means to be a good girl. But what does it mean to be a bad girl? And I see that someone is already saying, right, that feeling, loving yourself or voicing your needs could be seen as selfish and being a bad girl. Absolutely. So we can think about this in regards to attitudinal right? If we're prioritizing ourselves over others, that's seen as selfish. And how many of us have to battle with that still today, right? How do we prioritize self-love, self-care, self-empowerment when we might be told that we're supposed to really be prioritizing everyone else? See, breaking the rules, running away, hiding from authority. That makes me think of what bad girl meant for myself growing up. My grandmother thought that wearing red lipstick, so my red lipstick, which I've worn every day as a staple of my fashion for the last 10 years, that wearing red lipstick was definitely a sign of a bad girl, right? It's also advocating for yourself. I see this being repeated again, being a bad girl, being brash, being involved in the wrong activities. Ooh, and then someone has texted the panelists to say, being and then we've got the B word, right? We can think of the B word and swearing, but we could also think about it in regards to bossy, right? Anytime in which we see women kind of taking leadership positions, there can be this idea that, you know, women are being too much, right? That behavior was disrespectful, right? If we are loving ourselves. So this is very interesting to me because it does seem like, even though we've got alum from so many different years in the chat, there's a lot of consistency, right? And while we do have the opportunities, as was described with the good girl, to redefine this for ourselves, right? To rethink, what does it mean to be empowered, to have self-love? What can we do to rethink about these things, understanding that there is a consistency throughout our chat that shows that these social pressures are real, right? These notions of what it means that we should be doing, how we should be behaving, that those are very real. The notions of the good girl and the bad girl are heavily influenced by the ways in which our society privileges certain attributes for women, right? So attributes that may be more accessible if one has economic resources, right, and can dress a certain way, or maybe doesn't have to be as pushy, depending on like if they already have access to resources and don't have to advocate for those. It also could be, privileging of other attributes that are more accessible if someone is heterosexual or cisgender, meaning that they identify as the gender that they were associated with at birth. It's also kind of about being able-bodied, and in many cases about whiteness as well, right? In particular, we see media portrayals of the good girl tending to focus on these privileged identities, and we do see media association of the bad girl being affiliated with women of color or being from the poor side of town. We've certainly seen representations of Appalachia that have been really negative in regards to looking at this construct of the bad girl. The reality is that these basic notions of what it means to be a good girl or a bad girl, we can learn a lot about the social expectations then that we're putting on ourselves and how that can be internalized, right? And I'm seeing someone saying like, we can change this by recognizing that we're just as important as the next person, that we're all human. I love this, right? Because we can change this. We can reflect on how media, family, friends, educational institutions, etc., have informed our understanding of what we should do, but also have informed our understanding of what we are capable of. And we can have a vision of something different. We can have a vision of what it is that we want to achieve in our lives. So we're going to be...
So, not to interrupt you, but were we not going to talk about self-care today? Like this thing that you're really bad at in consideration of work and home life, Geneva?
I get it. So what it is that we're talking about might not sound like self-care, but it is. And I also understand what Mary Catherine just said, that there is a certain irony of me leading this presentation because I'm not known at being very good with self-care. If I had gotten to take the poll earlier, I would have said self-care, what? Because that's kind of how I feel. So those of you that are worried about this presentation guilting you for not having the best work-life balance, or that I'm going to tell you that there's a bunch of stuff that you should buy for your bubble bath or things like that, I'm going to be honest, like my self-care suffers too, and there's no guilt or shame here. We're going to do the best that we can in the moment. But I also have succumbed to the self-care don't care attitude that you can see on the screen, where I just don't understand how you want me to care for myself when I have so many other things and people to care for. There's just not enough time.
So now that we hopefully have some buy-in, I also bet self-care, so we're just owning up to that right now.
Right. So now that you all feel really confident that we're going to be able to help you with this, here's why we are here doing this. Learning how to survive and thrive is self-care. And self-care is not necessarily a tub bath in hot water, although it can be, and I do enjoy that every morning. Self-care isn't that we are going to have a guilt-free donut, although I do believe that there should be more guilt-free attitudes about food. Self-care, according to Audre Lorde, is doing what we need to do to survive these environments in which women are facing sexism, racism, other forms of oppression every day. Self-care is creating space for you to be able to survive throughout this and to think about community support for yourself as well. And that can be through sharing our emotions, asking for help, receiving help, being open to just receiving help. And if self-care is only buying stuff or the bubble bath or whatever, it can soften this radical notion that you all are describing. We can be bad girls in this self-love, the care, and to celebrate that self-care should and could include boundary setting as well as communal support. So have you ever heard of the Superwoman syndrome? Like, type in the chat if you've ever heard of the Superwoman syndrome. And I'm not talking about Superwoman, the television show, although I do love that show, and really any of the DC comic shows. But what does it mean when we say the Superwoman syndrome? What does that look like to you all? The Superwoman syndrome. Mary Catherine, when I think of the Superwoman syndrome and I can see your video up, I think of you and your cat dressed up with capes, like charging around the room.
I mean, that's great. I love that as a cartoon.
I think that would be very fun and enjoyable to see. But for those of you who are like, I'm not really sure, I've maybe heard of the Superwoman syndrome, but I'm not fully convinced. Michelle Wallace describes the myth of the Superwoman as the need for Black women to take on all roles in response to systemic oppression. So being the mother, the breadwinner, the community carer, etc., right? That she has to do all of these things. And I'm seeing that being echoed by Teresa in the chat, right? A woman who can carry and balance all aspects of her life and obligations. That doesn't sound overwhelming, does it at all? Woods Giscombe describes it as being both an asset and a vulnerability, this notion of the Superwoman, right? That we can do everything at all times. But what she says in her research is that while there's pressure to be strong all times and to be able to handle anything that comes at you and to be independent and succeed without help, while still being able to help others and being like the best caretaker, in addition to providing assets that enables you to do that to the best of your ability, right? Armor to combat what you're being faced with. There are also negative health consequences because of decreased self-care. By not paying attention to you and what your body needs, by not taking time to think about what you need for yourself. I'm seeing this in the chat, right? When you're doing things for everyone, when you're never complaining, when you're doing things perfectly and glamorously, do you all not feel worn out just having this conversation? Right? It can lead to issues of depression, damage to our bodies in relation to stress. And as Peter DeWitt demonstrates by this one quote of an anonymous woman who said, I'm carrying 65 pounds of unshed tears. It's being worn out. Let me be very clear in that I'm not saying health outcomes will improve with self-care and self-care alone. There are many other institutional things that need to be changed, right? We consider the bias that women face when we go to the doctor, and we are more likely to be told that our symptoms are psychosomatic as opposed to real and based in our body, right? So there's lots that needs to be changed. But when Audre Lorde talks about self-care, and self-care is self-preservation, she means that we should care for ourselves so that we can live. What does it mean to really live? Let's think about the Superwoman syndrome a bit more. I want you to consider all the roles that you occupy. And we're going to put a poll up as well about these roles. And I want you to mark all of the things that speak to you. So for myself, I occupy the roles of sister, friend, daughter, university administrator, teacher, supervisor, dog mom, mentor, your kid's favorite non-related aunt. And for some of you, or even many of you, you may also occupy the roles of wife or mother or partner or parent and many others that I haven't listed. But I want you to take this poll and just click on all of the different roles And if you want to put more in the chat of the things that you identify with that maybe aren't listed here because we just ran out of space.
I also want to let everybody know too that if the poll happens to be covering up our amazing faces, you can move it across the screen as well, so it's not in your way.
Yeah. I don't know about the rest of you.
Right now. Oh, sorry, we're at 61%.
Perfect. I don't know about the rest of you, but when I start thinking about my roles and responsibilities, I can just feel overwhelmed. And I'm seeing this in the chat, right? When Helen wrote, wow, right? There's not enough hours in the day. And when I consider how many roles I do not occupy that others do, I'm constantly wondering how anyone is able to do all of this. And it looks like you might be able to close the poll, Mary Catherine. And look at all of the roles that we occupy and what it must take in order to be able to balance that. And as you all said in the chat, the Superwoman Syndrome is this notion that all of these roles, we're going to do them perfectly, effortlessly. We will do them well, but not just well, we'll do them better than well, right? Good, great, perfect. For those of you who have heard of the imposter syndrome, this can play into our imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is this feeling of inadequacy that can persist despite evidence that we are not inadequate. It can feel as though we have to keep doing more. We have to keep demonstrating that we're not failing, that we have to demonstrate that we are good enough by taking on and on and on. But we're often measuring ourselves against an impossible line of success. And as discussed earlier, maybe that impossible line of success is the good girl, or maybe it's something else altogether. And so we're going to stop sharing those results and close that poll. And this has been like a little bit heavy, and so I want us to take a moment to talk about this impossible line of success by viewing two different videos. The first one you are probably really familiar with, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Oh, Mary Catherine, you've already got it loaded for us. We're going to switch to Mary Catherine's screen. Perfect. And she's going to play this first video for us. And I want you to write your initial thoughts into the chat when you see this video. We are all ready.
She's responding to those scandals. And what will it mean for the wider region? I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do. Pardon me. My apologies.
What does this mean for the region?
My apologies. South Korea's policy choices on North Korea have been severely limited in the last 6 months to a year.
Thank you, Mary Catherine. We're going to look at a response to this, and I want you all to think about what the differences are between these two videos, and feel free to share in the chat why this video, this parody in particular, is so funny.
The question now is, how do people respond to their scandals?
For the wider region, I think one of your children has just walked in, but I mean, shifting sands in the region, do you think relations with the North may change?
It's unclear at the moment what effect former President Gun-hae's impeachment will have on the territories. Unfortunately, discontent in South Korea is not only related to President Gun-hae's administration.
Okay.
This is a major embarrassment for South Korea, who often criticizes the North of corruption,
Right.
and who now find themselves in the middle of a massive corruption case themselves.
Sorry, you do look rather busy there. We can reschedule
President Gun-hae is
No.
very likely to face jail time too,
Okay.
I would argue, in an attempt to make an example of her.
Right, so what does this all mean for the future of South Korea?
So the future of South Korea really hangs in the balance.
Oh my God, is that a bomb?
And it'll be
Goodness
interesting
me.
to see how the North reacts to this new shift in power.
Indeed. Well, this certainly has been... sorry, your husband is...
I anticipate there'll be more to come from this region in the next few months.
Kate Wordsworth, you're obviously busy. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, let's find this sock then.
Like, I can't stop laughing every time I watch that parody video. Like, I have tears in my eyes because I think it's so funny. And I see you all saying, hilarious, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And Hannah, you have said Superwoman doing it all and doesn't miss a beat. So why is it so funny, right? Why is it that our response to this parody video, why was the parody video created? What is going on? And our social ideas of what it means to be a mom or a dad or a parent, that this video is what it is. Okay, so we've got one person saying that the dad's reaction seems like it's pretty common, right? But then in terms of like a mom's response, it's that they're expected to keep all the balls in the air and to look great while doing so. How are moms supposed to keep up with all of this during the pandemic? And I'm so glad that you said that. We are seeing news article after news article where they say moms can be moms or they can be employees, but can't be both. There's not enough time in the days. We're seeing that in journals, that they are saying that people are submitting less, women are submitting less of their articles to journals for publication. Men are submitting more right now, right? One person is saying that the person who's going in, running and grabbing, and like, I think that this is the thing, right? So his wife rushes in to help save the space, and he's done quite a few interviews afterwards and has talked about how people have made like a lot of assumptions about their family, etc. And I think that that's fair, right? That he talks about like it's a loving family, etc. But there is this prioritization, right, of how it is that we navigate these different roles. And when we see the parody one, it's quite striking, right? In terms of these are all of the additional things that are expected of women, and that we do it with grace and that we don't miss a beat. So as we're thinking about our own experiences, I want us to consider the ways in which, and I'm going to share my screen again, the ways in which we might be putting some unrealistic expectations on ourselves. Let's just think, for example, about what we just saw. If our expectation is that we do have to do all of these things without missing a beat, what does that mean for us and our own self-esteem and confidence? So when we consider all of our roles, the expectations that we internalize from others, etc., I want you to think back to our first discussion of what it means to be a good girl. And someone has shared this feeling that we might never be enough. Absolutely, right? Because we're supposed to be perfect and do it with grace, etc. So I want you to think about what you've been told you should be in your various roles. What does that look like? And I want you to share in the chat what you feel comfortable with sharing. You don't have to share anything more or less, right? But what should I be? I'm going to give you a pretty innocuous example. For myself as a daughter, I feel I should live closer to home so I can care for my family. This is a constant conversation between me and my family members. It is not anything that they have put on me, but it's something that I've put on myself and what I believe is important, right, as a daughter, as a good family member. And so I'm seeing people say, right, like there's these expectations of having to choose between work or sending kids to daycare. I think that we're going to see that a whole lot more, right, in terms of what I should be. I should be a perfect mom, or I should be a good employee, right? Are there other shoulds that people feel comfortable sharing in the chat? I'm going to give you all a moment to think about it. The shoulds. I should be able to juggle everything and still have time for myself. I should be spending time with friends. I should be married and have children. I'm not even dating. I should have a more successful job. I should be able to finish working and then be able to have a bunch of other hobbies or interests. I should be married with kids. That's a lot of shoulds, right? I should promote my husband getting his master's. I should postpone it. Yeah. I want you to consider something that might feel a little bit lighter. What you want to be. What you want to be. This can be the same, similar, or radically different from what you have been told that you should be. But it's important for us to distinguish what we want versus what others have told us we want. I'm thinking about the folks in the chat who are talking about how they're single and they don't have kids, and there are these pressures on women that that's what we should be. And there's a comedian on Netflix that I just watched. It was hilarious. She talks all about that, right? There's no reason as to why that should be, why our lives should be defined by relationships. So what is it that you want? And this may not be where you are yet, but it's where or what you want to be. And part of what we'll discuss today is whether or not it's actually realistic, because we can have lofty goals that maybe sometimes aren't realistic, but how can we have those goals without beating up on ourselves for not achieving them? How can we redefine our goals? And I see someone saying, right, I'm proud of my choices and I feel I'm doing a good job. And I think that's great, right? What I want to be is proud of my choices. Someone saying financial freedom. I want to be retired. I want to find success in non-career specific measures. I want to be more active. Spontaneous thinking. Yeah. For myself, I want to be physically and emotionally strong while still vulnerable. And I don't want to be impacted by what others think of me quite as much. Now, I want us to think in regards to how we can honor and take a moment to honor who you are today and now. I want you to write into the chat an affirming, declarative statement about yourself. And I want you to know that we believe in you. We've just met you, but we believe in you. And we also believe that you're not perfect, because none of us are. And there is a beauty in being okay with not being perfect. We can be amazing, awesome, wonderful people while still failing, while still being sad or scared. We do not have to be perfect to be the people that we care about and hold dear. And so, what are you now? In terms of myself, I am compassionate. I put others before myself. It's not necessarily what I want to be, but it is what I am, and it can be good. I believe in social justice. I'm dedicated to my work, family, and friends. And even if I don't always live up to my own expectations, no one ever doubts my commitment. And I see you all saying, I'm a lifelong learner and committed to continuous personal growth, caring towards my friends and family. I'm good and competent and can make mistakes in actions or judgments, which doesn't make me bad. We can celebrate all of these things that we are, and we should. At the Women's Center, we have something called a positivity jar. It's what we use when we think that we're underselling ourselves or we're not speaking confidently about ourselves. So when we have someone come into the Women's Center and they say, I can't do this, I'm so stupid, we say, that's not true. You haven't learned how to do it yet. You've had other priorities. I encourage you all also to have something that allows you to record your affirmations, where when you start doubting yourself or when you start thinking about what you should be, you take a moment to honor who you are and you say, as everyone is saying in the chat, I'm a good friend, I'm smart, I am capable, I can make a difference in the world, I'm strong, and I always put others before myself, but I also find fulfillment in caring for others. I can also be bold and bossy, same. We need more of these moments, and this is self-care. Now what I want you to do is to write about your stinky fish. The stinky fish is what gets in the way, what prevents us from achieving what it is that we want to be. Examples may include issues of bias, discrimination. We can try to manage these as best as we can, but I do think it's important for us to acknowledge that there are things external to ourselves that may prevent us from being what we want to be. I'll provide you with 2 examples for myself. Will you type in your own stinky fishes? For example, who I want to be sometimes runs counter to what society has said a female leader should be. And I may feel as though I have to manage stigma that I face as a female leader. And this means that sometimes I feel like I can't be who I want or who I am all the time. And that I can't do that if I want to be accepted in different circles. So for example, I dress like a 1950s housewife like every day, and Mary Catherine can attest to this for me, am I right? And I have been told that I won't be taken seriously as a leader if I continue to dress like this, right? And so for me, it is about making a decision that this might be my stinky fish, but I'm still going to be authentically me. But it is important for us to recognize that there are going to be things external to ourselves, but that doesn't mean that we're bad or that we're not good. I see someone put their stinky fish as imposter syndrome, worrying about what others think of me instead of what I think of me. That's also a good stinky fish, right? How can we find validation or find affirmation in other ways, right? That's not about what others think. One way in which we can do this is by challenging the negative aspects of the Superwoman syndrome by redefining success. Right? And I'm seeing a lot of you all worried about being judged, worrying about what others think. So how can we redefine success so that it takes some of that out of it? It's not about whether or not others have found us to be successful. It's not about what others think of us, but it's instead what success can look like for us. And for me, success includes space for failure. It's about beginning a new mantra that sometimes good enough is good enough. And I want you to share in the chat what success means to you. Yeah. For those that are sharing, and we've had some share straight to the panelists, right? Never feeling good enough and worrying that other people don't like me enough. I want us to redefine, right, what success is, where it is that we get validation, because I promise you, you are good enough. I know it deep in my heart, you are good enough. And I see some people saying success is happiness, present over perfect. I love that. So consider what it is that's important to you and also what helps you feel healthy and happy, right? As someone shared. How may real success look different than what is presented to us on social media if we're comparing, right, ourselves to others? For those of you that are staying at home during COVID, I know that I was stressed by seeing posts on Facebook about how clean houses were or how folks had suddenly found the time to, I don't know, learn 3 different new languages, it felt like. I also felt this pressure to be able to do it all, and I still do, but I also had to redefine success for me to consider how success can look. So success for me does not include vacuuming. I actually joke that my wood floors look like shag carpet because of the amount of dog hair that is on it. Success instead for me looks like not working throughout the night and playing a board game instead. Instead, success means setting boundaries, right? And I see people sharing the ways in which they're able to find success, laying their head on their pillow at night and feeling like they've done a good job, knowing I gave my best. People sharing that their children and husband helped them feel successful. I really appreciate that. Having a good support team is so important. And as we think about this, right, as we're changing our notions of success, we might have to reflect on what we can do to get us to that definition of success, right? Let's consider the ways in which we might be able to reprioritize our time. So I want you all to think, how do you currently distribute your time? What tasks do you complete on a regular basis? By thoroughly analyzing what we do on the day-to-day, we can begin to think about what we can reorganize or restructure. So for myself, I've created this, right? I know that I work way too much, right? I'm 8 to 5, but I wind up doing a lot of other hours as well because I'm a perfectionist. I do have to spend time with my dog because he's my best friend. I do care work with my family and friends. I like to cook. I don't like to clean. Right? These are some of the ways in which I'm spending my day. And then I can start thinking, if I could choose how to redistribute my time, what would that look like? So I want you all to be thinking, what would this look like? And you've got the handout. And so after our session today, I really want you to dive into some of these, but we'll talk through what it can look like, right? If I could reprioritize my time, I would not worry about trying to clean a little bit every day. I would focus Saturday and Sunday for gardening and cleaning. And then I would do other needs, right? Like sleeping. And then you have to think, how is it that we can redistribute our time in a way that's actually realistic, right? Because in our dream world, it could be I'll spend Monday through Friday doing the job that I love that I don't have yet. I mean, like, there are things that we might not be able to change quickly, or we might not be able to change completely. So how is it that we can realistically make some alterations, right? And so for me, I had to start thinking, okay, I've been working a lot at night, and that doesn't make me feel really happy, right? So is there a way I can reprioritize my time? So I took email notifications off my phone so I won't be distracted when I'm at home. And Monday night, I was actually thinking about you all, and I was wanting to work for this. And I was thinking, you know what? I want to play a game with a friend, and I'll get up early. And so I started reprioritizing my time by restructuring my day in terms of the hours that I would feel happier working. So I'm not missing out on social time with people. Social time, of course, through Zoom during COVID, right? And in that sense, when I'm renegotiating my time distribution, I am not going to be doing everything that I think I should be doing in the way in which I feel like it should be done. So there are things that must be done, and we have to prioritize those that are most important to you and the things that need you, and potentially only you, in order to be able to get done. I'm thinking in particular for those of you that are caring for children or aging family members, right? You can't necessarily reprioritize yourself out of that. But we might have some ways in which we can think about doing things up to a certain point. How can we manage our unrealistic expectations of having a spotless home or the gourmet meal or whatever? What can we let go of? And someone shared earlier a mantra that I really like, and I'm hoping that I can find it, but it was the,
Present over perfect, or
thank you, present over perfect. I think that that's wonderful. And I want to know what other mantras you all might have. How do we articulate that good enough is good enough? I haven't perfected this yet, but I'm learning and growing. Oh, I like this. Maybe I need to be as good a friend to myself as I try to be to others. That's wonderful. And progress, not perfection. So we should be incorporating these, right? These mantras, so that when we start having this internal challenge that we're not good, that we're bad, that we're not living up to what it is that we should be living up to, if those are unrealistic, we need to start responding in our minds and saying things like progress, not perfection. Or you could just steal from Leslie Knope and start saying, I am a goddess, a glorious female warrior, enemies of equality and fairness, hear my womanly roar. Present over perfect. And then how do we remind ourselves daily that we are good enough? And I think the person who shared earlier that their husband and children were really quite validating and a great support team, that's part of this, right? How can we maybe look to more communal support? How is it that we can write notes to ourselves around the house to remind ourselves daily that we're good enough? I can do hard things, someone shared. I love that as well. Less news and social media in general, right? So creating boundaries for ourselves to help us hold us accountable, right? That we are good enough. Absolutely. And then you can also take that affirmation jar activity that we talked about earlier, right? Mary Catherine says that she gives a lot of positive affirmations to her friends. I can vouch for that. And that's helpful in terms of feeling fulfilled. Someone else said earlier as well that they also really enjoy caring for others, right? And so thinking about how some of these expectations, we can reflect on the impact that they have in our lives in a good way as well. But as we're thinking about building communal support, as we think about how it is that we can hold ourselves accountable, let's think about this community, right? For me, I know that I need to be more vulnerable with my close friends and confidence to let them know when I'm struggling and ask them for support. Yeah, and I see someone saying that they post photos of how they're present and post them to social media, smelling the roses, taking a picture, and sharing. I love that. Finding beauty in our world and our environments that can help us in terms of creating a moment of mindfulness right? A moment in which we can really just pause and reflect and also center ourselves in our feelings. Sometimes we're going so much that we don't have the time, we don't think we have the time to be able to stop and say, okay, how is it that I'm feeling right now in this moment? And I like this notion of being present by taking a photograph, or even taking a photograph that represents how it is that you're feeling right now. It's good. I want you to think about those moments in which you know that you're going to need more self-care. And I want you all to share these in the chat. When are the moments in which self-care is needed for you? And this activity is taken directly from the Audre Lorde Project. So for me, when I think about the moments in which self-care might be needed, I can think and reflect back on when my grandmother was still with us, and she was absolutely wonderful, but she had dementia, and that required me to have some self-care in order to be able to respond to the challenges associated with dementia with the care, grace, and patience that I aspired to have that didn't always actualize, right? More recent times, I know that I need self-care when I'm feeling my imposter syndrome being a bit out of control, so I empathize with a lot of you, right? Even when I'm preparing this presentation for work, or when I'm feeling anxious about COVID and its impact on my loved ones' lives, my own life. I see someone saying that when they're feeling anxious and overwhelmed as well. So what are these moments, right? Someone said when they have a difficult meeting at work and that it might be uncomfortable. Yeah. So if we can start to try to anticipate these moments in our lives in which self-care is needed, because remember, Audre Lorde says that self-care is self-preservation. It is survival, right? If we can anticipate these moments when, as someone says, when worry takes over and I don't sleep and I know I need to stop and breathe. Absolutely. So if we can try to plan for them, we can then also think about the things that we need, both with our body and what was just shared, right? Our biological needs, our physical needs. We need to stop. We need to breathe. We need sleep. Sometimes we need a shower. And then we can also think about what our mind needs, our emotional needs, our thought process. So when you're feeling anxious and overwhelmed, what can you do in terms of your mind? And someone has shared trying to meditate, right? Or go for a walk outdoors, and how that can be both our mind as well as our body, right? Carving that space for ourselves. What are some other ways? Work out without my phone. Yes, yes. For myself, work out with very loud music. Yeah. Trying to be there. Yeah, present in the moment. And for my emotional needs, I do have to ask for help. I have to reach out. And someone else has shared that we can't rely so much on social media that tells us you can sleep when you're dead, or other sorts of notions of success, right? And so turning off social media, walking away if you need to. Self-care is drawing boundaries so that you can remove yourself as best you can from those unhealthy environments. And we can think about what the heart needs. These can be motivational needs, spiritual needs, but it's how you stay grounded. For me, sometimes it's helpful for me to reflect on empowering quotes. When I need motivation, sometimes I watch movies that I like to hate watch that help me feel all riled up to do the work it is that I'm doing. And someone has shared, realize that the hustle lifestyle isn't always healthy. So sometimes listening to our heart is also thinking, what are our needs right now in terms of being able to keep our emotional needs, our motivational needs? Maybe we need to step back. Maybe we don't need to be as motivated right now. And then community. These are the needs from your social relationships, your interpersonal needs, your community support. And for me, because I live alone, except unless you count my dog, it is really important that I let people know so I don't isolate. So reaching out to those community needs, my neighborhood family, right? my colleagues. As we think about that, who's on your support team? And I love that you all are anticipating some of these questions. Someone just posted girls' night on Zoom with wine. So as you think about your support team, I think sometimes it can be helpful for us to make a list. Who are the people that we can reach out to? And it doesn't have to be a lot of people, right? This doesn't have to be a competition of who all do we know and how do we know, but rather I know that if I need something, right? I know that I can reach out to Mary Catherine. I know I can reach out to my neighbor or to Don or my family. And I can think in regards to how I might use them for different things as well. There might be moments or events that I know that I need self-care in which different people might be able to help me differently. And I see someone saying that community is on the top of my list. Church, OU alum, friends, golfing girlfriends. And if you're sitting there and you're thinking, okay, I maybe need more community, let us know, right? There's so many alum events that you can attend to build connection, to make community, but then we're also always available to you at the Women's Center, from international coffee hours to just popping by our open office hours. We are here for you. And someone wrote that it's important to believe that when one does reach out and asks for help, it's not a sign of weakness, but of strength. And I want to echo that. There is something so strong about us being able to say what it is that we need. So how can you ask for help and support? And how do you create the opportunity for you to receive that support? Someone shared that there is this notion that we're supposed to be able to take care of others, that you can make it all better for everyone else. But as super women, we need to also take care of ourselves to be able to care for others effectively. And we sometimes forget this piece. And I agree. So we have to be willing to ask for help. We have to be willing to receive that help. And when we do, it's amazing. So no, we know you from this, but we want to be here for you. And so Mary Catherine's going to put some information for how you can contact us, and you'll also be able to see it on the screen here in a second. But I want you to remember that there's a lot of stinky fishes out there. There's a lot of expectations that get put on us that don't need to be there. We can challenge the ideal, and we can, for ourselves, define what it means to be good enough, to be strong, to be capable, and to be empowered. I want to thank you all so much for joining us today. You have been just an absolute pleasure. And will the previous slide be sent around? So if it's the question about this slide, we can make sure that everyone who is currently here, and Barbara, if you can help us with that, make sure that they get the handout for today, because it has all the information from these activities for you all to really be able to dig down into on your own. Because I know it was a whirlwind today, but I'm hopeful that our conversation in the chat has really helped you feel inspired to learn from one another and take advantage of the resources that have been really useful to me as well, that you all have been kind enough to share with us. Thank you all so much, and we look forward to seeing you at future presentations as well.
Yeah, Dr. Murray and Mary Catherine, thank you so much for that presentation. That was wonderful. It's really eye-opening, at least for me, to see some of the pressures that are put on the women in my life. It's going to make me look at things differently. And so that was great. Such a valuable topic. And so we appreciate everything that you both do at the Women's Center at Ohio. And we appreciate you taking the time to present. And we're super thankful for everyone that was here for the first Empower Hour. And so this event will take place bi-weekly. And so be on the lookout for an announcement for our next presenter and the next group of presentations that are coming. We're building out that calendar, and it's going to be wonderful events similar to this, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So thanks again, and I hope to see everyone soon, and go Bobcats.